welcome to anybody watching this. I wanted to capture some of the backstory and intentions around Modacity's evolution with a new CEO. And my mom, who is a Modacity user and just a great supporter, has joined me for this call to kind of help keep the conversation going, ask some questions, and share her reflections too. So I'm hoping this will be a sweet window into some of what went into Modacity and what's going into its future. So welcome, Maureen, my mom.
Hi, everybody.
And yeah, Mom, you prepared a couple of questions to ask me to help the conversation get
Yeah,
going.
I would be super interested to hear again what prompted you to develop Modacity, and if you could share with folks what the original concept was and the original title. I think that'd be fun.
Yeah, yeah. So it started, I think, when a lot of people don't know this, I was on tour with San Francisco Symphony in Asia, and I went to a virtual reality arcade in Shanghai and played this game called Beat Saber, which later became very popular. And I realized, oh my God, the future of like embodied multidimensional training has arrived. And my brain went to, what if we could create music training apps in virtual reality? And I finished the tour and started coding some virtual reality apps. And then I went and I sat a 10-day Vipassana meditation retreat. And in that retreat, my inner knowing just got clearer and clearer and clearer that it was time for me to set my performance career to the side and to build music training software, because I'd been dreaming about that for 20 years. When I went to Indiana, um, I did a computer science, cognitive science degree, and my approach to horn practicing in my career was always informed by that, but I never had the tools that I wanted. So it started out as something called Music Star Games, and we had this app called Sound Painter that was like a virtual reality 3D racing game
Oh,
where,
yeah.
yeah, you can make sound, and the sound would like expand your cursor, like boop boop boop, and you had to collect diamonds and stuff with the sound cursor. And I think I I I spent a lot of time and money developing that, and we had, I'm not even sure, one user or two users. It was quite, I joked that Music Star Games had more apps than users at one point, because I made a couple apps. I made Chakra long tones. I worked with some like Indian offshore development firm to build Chakra long tones, which was taking the first 7 formants of your long tone and visualizing them as like discs expanding from your being that you could see in virtual reality as you played a time. And then I made Practice Now was the name of the app. Great name for an app, Practice Now, which was the immediate predecessor to Modacity. And it was just a real kludge. It was built in this video game environment because that's what I'd been building in. So it was actually a 3-dimensional interface that just looked 2-dimensional. But if in the development, you could like rotate around it and look at it from the side and stuff. Like, oh, that button's a little off. um, and that actually had something like 40, 50, 60 users. It was like, okay. And then I went to Founder Institute
Oh,
because
yes.
I was struggling so hard to figure out how to make something that would actually reach people. And you remember how stressful
Mm.
that first year was for me, 2017. I was like really at my wit's end. And Founder Institute was a saving grace for me.
Hmm.
They got me step by step into creating Modacity, which was almost called Modavity, but I thought it sounded like cavity, body cavity or something. I just didn't like that. So
Glad
Modacity.
you went with Modacity.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's how things got started.
Um, I know you've had a long journey with a lot of ups and downs.
Mm.
Um, Out of all of that, what has been the most satisfying part of this whole experience?
Yeah. Yeah. Hearing that question, I think about the public facing communications of Modacity to date. And when you're a founder of an app at 3 a.m. in your home office, like banging a table or crying in frustration, you don't send an email out to the Modacity community saying, I'm freaking out. I have no idea what to do. Like the communications are just like, hey, we've got an update. Like, hey, things are great. Like, here's some resources for you. And so I think people don't realize how big those ups and downs have been. I know you've seen it.
Hmm.
I've lived it. Um, I would say that the most and the satisfying things are often equivalent to, it's like the amplitude is high. So
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, some of the things that have been satisfying is seeing Jason Heath, for example, huge supporter, massive practicer, star in the double bass world, host of a very popular contrabass conversations podcast, to not just adopt the app, but like take it and run with it like a missionary. I mean, he's taken it to conferences, to shows, to
Mm.
his teaching studio. He writes blog posts about it, and we don't pay him. We don't ask him to do that. He just is such a missionary. And people all over the world have written in and said, like, yeah, this is something that I've been waiting for a long time. That's been satisfying. I think, and then working with Jared has been one of the most satisfying things about Modacity, like finding a teammate who I could rely on
Hmm.
to help communicate to users and community, which is so important to us. I mean, literally, I don't think there's been a single message that has come through to the Modacity inbox since 2017 that we haven't responded to personally.
No, that's impressive.
And
That's
yeah, and what that means though is that, like, man, there was a lot of stuff I was trying to do. Jared was initially one of the Modacity beta testers. We didn't hire him. We didn't seek to hire anybody. We just got on the phone and talked a lot. And then I realized, like, he understands the app, he understands the users, he's practicing, he's cultivating, he's meditating. He knows how to practice. And so he
Mhm.
was a perfect fit for that. And he's grown with the company. I really appreciate that like meaningful multi-year relationship.
And I
Um,
know you've had your challenges with other finding reliables and
yeah.
staff members with integrity. It's been hard.
Yeah. And that's that's a deep regret of mine, is that just how much I've struggled to be able to build the app in ways that I've wanted. And a lot of that has been my just not really being up to speed on process or knowing how to prioritize things, knowing how to manage developers. And I feel really sad about that. And I also feel hopeful because I've learned a lot in the last couple
Hmm.
of years from my other initiatives and jobs. And
Hmm.
having someone else in the CEO role means that I don't have to worry so much about the business, but that when Michael comes to me and says, can you manage spaced repetition? I'm like, yes, I can. I can handle developer and have more specialization.
Well, that led into my question. You've kind of answered it, is uh, why you wanted to move on from being the CEO. Is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah. I remember, so this wasn't ever disclosed to the Modacity community, but in 2019, I took a software engineering job at Evernote for the entire year because I needed to generate enough income to support myself while I continued to work on Modacity. And I remember going into Evernote thinking, like, I'm a CEO of a company, and maybe I'll be CEO of Evernote. Maybe I should just be CEO of Evernote now. I just like really naive thoughts. of, yeah, that word CEO is so bandied around. Like, if you're a CEO, that means you're worth something and
Hmm.
means you're skilled. And something that I've really had to come to terms with is how humbling it's been to be in that role. And my first role as CEO, of course, it's hard, but yeah, I learned a lot from the CEO of Evernote, and I learned a lot from, CEO of Guitar Mastery Intensive, Spencer, who I
Hmm.
work with as his
Hmm.
technology officer, um, and a lot of startup CEOs. And as hard it is for me to admit, I'm not sure that that role is actually what my zone of genius is.
Hmm.
And it's hard for me to admit because I I wanted to be I wanted to be the CEO. I wanted to be this, really direct the company. And but what I'm learning is that CEO involves a lot of jobs that aren't aren't really where I thrive. And where I thrive is vision and uh, yeah, understanding music practice, doing research, driving product. But driving a business is something that I've never been trained in and
Hmm.
have no skills in. You get an MBA if you want to be CEO. And Michael, yeah, I mean, I don't know if he has an MBA, but he has the equivalent in real life experience. He's worked for a lot of companies, spent his whole life in business. He's, trained lawyer. He passed the bar exam. So he's got that like executive mentality. And he also really has this team mentality. So for me, cohering a team together uh, was a beautiful opportunity, but also something new for me.
Hmm.
When I played in orchestras and when I've worked on projects, I haven't ever been like at that kind of hierarchy top point. And managing morale and getting everyone together, I learned a lot and had some
Hmm.
talent at it. But yeah, it's not. I definitely am glad that someone else can step in to do
Hmm.
that now.
Yeah. What do you see for the future of Modacity with Michael at the helm?
Mhm. Yeah, I know that he we've been talking for a year now at this point, and he's really taken to heart the importance of spaced repetition, of tracking your instruments, of through like a profiles feature,
Hmm.
improving the audio system, uh, putting in resources like being able to load sheet music and MP3s,
Mm.
and having hierarchical items so you can have Beethoven sonata and then break it into movement one, movement two, movement three, and you can break movement one into measure 63.
That'd
and
be awesome.
and then the other thing regarding the app is um, making it simpler and easier to use. That's actually his first priority. And I really appreciate, we're working on that right now together to make it just, yeah, so people can come in, understand the information architecture, and actually get the benefits of practice. He's looking at community features for accountability and sharing your practices. And ultimately that leads towards an ecosystem with teachers and influencers and students being able to share practice items, practice lists, perhaps a marketplace of practice lists. Like if you're a clarinet player and you see, oh, like here's a practice framework for improving my long tones as a clarinet player by the principal clarinet at the Metropolitan Opera, and you can buy it, download it, and practice it. That,
Mm, I love that idea.
yeah. And I trust Michael to prioritize and build these things in the sequence that makes sense for the business, and yeah, and to do it well. And then he's also working on courses and other offerings that complement the app so that
Mhm.
Modacity becomes really the best in class home for anybody
Mhm.
who cares about deliberate practice.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
That sounds really encouraging.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm stoked about that. And I'm so grateful to have his energy and enthusiasm and discipline moving on that, when for me that kind of work burned me out. Like I can
Mhm.
vision all day long, I can practice all day long, but
Mhm.
I can't like manage those kinds of processes.
Well, you were really doing it all. I mean, you had your team, but it was on your shoulders, the whole
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, it was. And I was
Yes.
trying, I was still getting invited to play with San Francisco Symphony and
Mhm.
Philadelphia Orchestra and Orlando Philharmonic and fly around the world.
Mhm.
And I would go for weeks without playing my horn, months, and then Philadelphia Orchestra would call me and I have to, I couldn't have done it without Modacity because I had changed my embouchure too. And that was one of the big motivations that I didn't touch on was coming into that 2016, 2017 curve. I had decided to really fundamentally change the way that I hold and approach the horn, where I put it on my lips. That's called the
Mhm.
embouchure.
Mhm.
And I was a total beginner. I couldn't play a C major scale, one octave
Mhm.
with that change. And I knew that I would need software to retrain myself. And Modacity was that software. And it actually worked. Like I'm a better horn player
Mhm.
in some ways than I ever have been. I just played 2 shows of the Nutcracker, like pretty decent, pretty cold, and sailed these high notes, which I struggled with high notes
Yeah.
for so many
Mhm.
years.
Yep.
Yeah, so I feel like my work in creating, bringing it to life, like I did that thing and I have the app on my phone and there's so much more that can be done with it. And I know that I can sleep knowing that I can pick up that app whenever I need to practice and get a good practice in.
Is Michael going to be open to suggestions from the users if they would like something?
Oh yeah. And he and Jared are continuing to work together. And I think actually I've already seen them improve the system where now Jared's collecting the feedback and like distilling it into weekly reports to Michael, and then Michael's
Beautiful.
prioritizing. And he is in some ways more open because he's less dogmatic than I've been. I've been super dogmatic, and I think that's good to an extent. But for the app to grow in this phase requires a little bit more openness to what the market wants and to what the user base needs, rather than what like one
Mhm.
visionary kind of mad scientist needs.
Mhm.
And I feel Michael's really positioned to be that open vessel of leadership and service.
Mm. Very glad to hear that.
Yeah, me too. I'm glad to know that in my heart. So I wonder, Mom, if you'd be willing to share a few reflections about what it was like watching you go through this journey, a little backstory for folks.
Oh, it has been wonderful and it has been heart rending at times. It's been amazing to see the development of this product and just to see something come into fruition and be embraced by so many folks. And the app made me realize that I play a little bit of keyboard and some ukulele, and the app taught me how to practice. It's not enough just to play the song over and over without addressing a particular technique you're having trouble with or a measure. And it really taught me to slow down. And if it's one note you want to work on the one note. And I I've always had trouble getting organized because there's what you're practicing, what you want to learn,
Yeah.
where you're going wrong,
Yeah.
ideas that you know. I mean, it's just hard to get everything organized, what you've accomplished. So, Modacity gives you a place to put all of that without having to keep it in your brain. And the tough part for me was when the challenges came up and my heart would just go out to see all the struggles with finding personnel, and really made me aware of the challenges of bosses in general. And it's not easy to run a company.
Definitely, definitely not.
But
Yeah.
um,
Mm.
very, very proud of what Mars has accomplished. Really, I mean, it's really amazing. You know, not there's not a ton of people that have a vision and see it bloom like that in a relatively short time.
Yeah. Yeah, it came out quick for sure once Founder Institute happened. Yeah, and I really want to acknowledge you, Mom, for the way that you've supported Modacity with your time and showing up for advisor meetings. We had the advisory board, and yeah, just like all the listening and emotional support that you provided. It feels good to go public about the fact that it has been a real struggle at times for me, and I have fallen short of my dream, and I do feel some grief about that, or I have felt some grief about that. And
Mhm.
for months at a time, I might have avoided that grief by just not thinking about Modacity, and um, you know, because it also wasn't ever quite scaling financially the way that I was managing it
Mhm.
enough to let me focus on it. And it feels good to take responsibility for that and let that be in the past,
Mhm.
and to see what I believe is a more sustainable future for the app, for the business, and for the community. Yeah, and one thing that I want to add to the community is that while I'm not working in CEO fashion now, that does free up my time. And my greatest joy and one of my true zones of genius is in one-on-one coaching and facilitation. And I'm really happy now that I have a few slots for coaching clients and music practice and just holistic practice. And so if anyone listening to this video is interested in really kind of rocket charging their practice, overcoming any limits, understanding how to use Modacity more deeply to achieve their goals, or to even just to get more clear on how they can achieve their goals, I am available for that and can be reached at yeah, the contact information that'll be on this video.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
And I can attest to what a ultimate practicer
Yeah.
Mars is. I have heard many repetitions of the same horn passage, each one perhaps getting a tiny little bit better and smoother.
Yeah, or at least different. Um, yeah, thanks. You have heard a lot of horn practice over the years, that's for sure. Well, thank you, Mom. I really appreciate being able to
Of
make this
course.
video with you, and I hope that this lands with the Modacity community to really understand how much my heart has been in this project, and continues to support the app with a more aligned role and yeah, bigger team.
You're very welcome. And
Yeah. Blessings, everyone. Happy practicing.